Imagine a street where every house once cost as much as a factory. Marble staircases, crystal chandeliers, private drivers waiting at every door. This was the richest street in Detroit, Millionaires' Row, the place where auto kings and financial predators lived. If you were born here, you owned the city. But look at it today. The same facades now, with broken windows. A place that once echoed with jazz and laughter has turned into a corridor of burned-out mansions, graffiti, and weeds. Politicians call it the natural decline of the city, but behind this darkness hides another story. Greed, racial segregation, red lines on bank maps, strange fires that started exactly when owners needed insurance money. This is not just a story about old houses. It is a story about the people who were pushed out of Detroit's most expensive street and those who got rich from its death. And today, among the ruins, a few houses still stand where, sometimes at night, a light turns on, as if someone is still guarding the secrets of Millionaires' Row. What really killed the richest street in Detroit? Time, crisis, or a carefully planned crime no one wants to talk about out loud? If you enjoy deep investigations into Gilded Age architecture and the families who built it, please like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments which house to explore next. Your support makes these detailed stories possible. The tour begins at dusk, when the sky is still faintly blue and the streetlights are just starting to buzz. Jamal, an architect in his mid-30s, stands beneath a flickering streetlight on Woodward Avenue. Behind him, 6 people clustered together, phones raised, their flashlight beams cutting narrow cones through the growing dark. This is what is left of Detroit's most famous corridor of wealth, a stretch of road where an address once meant you had already won. They walk slowly. Jamal points to an empty lot on the left. Weeds push through cracked concrete. A rusted chain-link fence leans around nothing in particular. This was the Henderson Mansion, he says. 40 rooms, built in 1895, gone by 1978. The group murmurs. Someone snaps a photo of the emptiness as if trying to capture a house that is no longer there. Across the street, a single building glows. Warm light spills from tall windows. Music drifts out. Jazz, maybe blues. The structure is massive stone and brick, its facade carefully restored and cleaned. A discreet sign reads The Millionaire's Table, a restaurant tucked inside what was once a timber baron's private palace. That one survived, Jamal says. His voice carries a mix of pride and something heavier, a sound that might be relief or tiredness from telling this story so many times. They continue north. The street widens. More empty lots open up between scattered mid-century buildings. A gas station, a self-storage box, a shuttered medical clinic with faded letters over the door. The architecture tells no clear story. It looks as if someone took scissors to a photograph and cut out most of the image, leaving random fragments floating in white space. Jamal stops at another fence. This one wraps around something real, a mansion, or what remains of one. 3 stories of stone, windows sealed with plywood. The roof sags, graffiti climbs the lower walls. Yet the skeleton still stands. The grand entrance, the curved bay windows, the carved stone flourishes that once signaled wealth so large it needed no explanation. This is the Holbrook House, Jamal says quietly, last of the originals on this block. Built 1902, reportedly costs $200,000 when factory workers made $2 a day. He does not tell them the rest yet, that he grew up hearing stories about this street, that his grandmother rode the bus past these houses every morning on her way to clean someone else's home in a different rich neighborhood, that his father brought him here as a boy and said this was our Millionaire's Row, meaning Detroit's, meaning something that once felt like it belonged to the whole city, even if most people could never live here. The tour group takes their photos. Someone asks if the house is haunted. Jamal smiles and gives them the expected ghost story. The old lumber king, who supposedly walks the empty halls at night, searching for the fortune he lost, but his eyes keep drifting back across the street to that plywood-covered facade. The real ghost story is simpler. A street that forgot it was rich, a city that slowly trained itself not to look. The tour ends near his car. People thank him, tuck phones into pockets, and head toward their own vehicles. Jamal pulls out his phone. 3 unread emails wait on the screen. The top one is from a city address he does not recognize. Subject line: Notice of demolition proposal, 4510 Woodward Avenue. He does not open it. Not yet. He stands there, in the cooling night air, staring at that last mansion, the one that somehow survived fires and foreclosures and decades of being left alone. His phone vibrates again. The same email nudges its way back to the top, still unopened. To understand what Jamal sees in that abandoned mansion, you have to go back to when Woodward Avenue was not a street of ghosts, but a street of arrivals. The year is 1890. Detroit is growing faster than almost any other city in America. Money pours in from timber, from iron, from the new automobile business that will soon reshape the planet. And the men who control that money need somewhere to show the world what they have become. They choose Woodward. The avenue is wide and tree-lined, close enough to downtown for convenience, but far enough away to feel removed from the smoke and noise. Land is still open. The city is pushing north. This is where you build if you want to announce without a word that you have arrived. The first mansions rise quickly, stone and brick, almost never wood. Wood is for ordinary houses. These buildings are meant to last. They need weight. They are designed to say, "My family will still be here when yours is forgotten." One of the largest takes shape in 1902. The foundation alone requires weeks of labor. Crews dig deep into Michigan clay, pour thick concrete set, massive stone blocks, by hand and pulley. The walls climb 3 full stories. Indiana limestone covers the facade. Marble from Vermont forms the grand staircase. Carved oak panels line the library. Stained glass windows arrive in crates from a workshop in Chicago. When you hear Woodward Avenue in Detroit, you're not just thinking of a road. You're thinking of a symbol, a specific stretch, once called Millionaire's Row, where the game of life seemed won before it even started. Mansions with private tutors, manicured lawns, and a life carefully shielded from the city's grit. What the society pages never printed, though, was who actually kept these houses alive. That story lived on entirely different streets. The mansions didn't run themselves. Every morning, before the sun was fully up, streetcars rattled north, along Woodward, filled with the city's working people. Black families from the east side, European immigrants from the West, Polish, German, Irish crowded onto wooden benches, lunch pails on their laps, heading toward houses they would never own. It was the same street, the same era, but a completely different reality. At a place like the Holbrook Mansion, the household staff slipped in through a back entrance. A cook, 2 housemaids, a laundress, a gardener, the exact number changed with the social calendar. But the rule was always the same. Wealthy families demanded workers, and workers had to stay invisible. This was the unspoken architecture of Millionaire's Row. Grand staircases for owners, narrow backstairs for staff, glistening ballrooms for guests, sweltering kitchens for cooks. The marble front entrance was built to impress. The servants' rooms under the roof had sloped ceilings, thin walls, and windows that barely opened. The pay was steady, but modest. A housemaid might earn $8 a week. A skilled cook, maybe 12. They worked 6, sometimes 7 days a week, moving through rooms filled with objects worth more than their yearly salary. They dusted furniture that cost what their families paid in rent for an entire year, and they didn't complain much. It was a better job than the factories, safer than the foundries. For black workers especially, domestic service was one of the few paths to a regular income in a city where most employers simply would unhire them. The line between their world and the world of their employers was hard and clear. Jamal's grandmother, who worked in a similar district, put it plainly years later, with no bitterness but no illusions either. She said, "Those were houses you didn't walk past without a reason. Either you worked there, or you had no business being there." The workers lived in neighborhoods like Black Bottom and Hem, where houses were small, packed together, and rent bit deep into their wages. These places never appeared in the society pages, that worshipped Millionaires Row. The newspapers described garden parties and debutante balls, but never mentioned who cooked the food, scrubbed the floors, or kept the coal furnaces roaring through the harsh Michigan winters. This invisibility wasn't an accident. It was built into the system. The wealth on display on Woodward Avenue depended on labor that had to stay out of sight. The fantasy of effortless prosperity only works if the effort is hidden. By the 1920s, Millionaires Row was like a polished stage set, and the workers were the unseen stagehands, brought in before dawn and carried away after dark. This arrangement held for decades. The mansions stood. The parties rolled on, but under the surface, the ground was already shifting. Economic forces and racial tensions were building, and the street that looked so permanent was far more fragile than anyone was willing to admit. And when it finally broke, the workers would be the first to pay the price. The tour is over. The street is quiet now. Jamal sits in his car, engine off, staring at his phone. The email is still there, unopened. The subject line hangs on the screen like a warning. Notice of demolition proposal, 4510 Woodward Avenue. He knows that address. It's the Holbrook house. The last one. His finger hovers over the screen. He's seen notices like this before. They're always polite, full of bureaucratic jargon, and quietly final. Structurally unsound. Prohibitively expensive to restore. It's code for, "We're tearing it down." He taps and opens the email. A company called Great Lakes Storage Solutions has filed a demolition proposal. A public comment period is open for 30 days. He opens the attachment. It's a rendering of a modern, 4-story self-storage facility. Glass and steel, clean lines, efficient, professional, and completely disconnected from everything around it. In the image, the Holbrook mansion is simply gone. Not even a shadow remains. Replaced. Paved over. Erased. He sits there for a long moment, phone in his hand. As traffic slides past on Woodward, he thinks about his grandmother on those morning streets. He thinks about his father bringing him to this very spot when he was a kid. The mansion was already empty then, peeling and sagging, but it was still standing. This was our Millionaires Row, his father had said. Not theirs, meaning the wealthy families, but ours, meaning Detroit's. His father was a practical man, an electrician, not one for sentiment. But he stared at that house like it mattered. "Your great-grandfather helped wire some of these places," he'd said. He wasn't allowed to use the front entrance, but he knew every inch of the walls inside. Jamal was too young then to feel the full weight of that. Sentenced the pride and the hurt twisted together. The idea that you could build something beautiful and still never be welcome in it. But he understands it now. He closes the email and scrolls through his contacts, finding a name he hasn't used in months. Detroit Historical Preservation Alliance. He'd met them at a conference, and they told him to reach out if he ever wanted to do more than just tell stories about the past. He never called. Leading tours is one thing. Walking people through what's already gone. It feels safe. But trying to stop a demolition, that's different. That means believing you might actually win. And Jamal let go of that belief a long time ago. But staring at the rendering of the storage facility, something shifts. He takes a breath, and his finger finds the call button. Have you ever heard of the city Henry Ford built in the middle of the Amazon jungle? It wasn't just a factory. It was a grand, utopian experiment called Fortlandia, meant to be a perfect slice of Midwestern America, complete with clapboard houses, pitched roofs, and tidy lawns. In 1928, Ford acquired 2.5 million acres in Brazil to grow his own rubber, freeing his company from foreign suppliers. He envisioned not just a plantation, but an entire city built on American values and efficiency, a city that answered only to him. Blueprints drawn up in Michigan were sent down to the jungle. Streets were laid in rigid grids. A hospital, schools, and a water tower stamped with the Ford logo rose from the rainforest. The goal was to transform everything. The jungle was raw material to be organized, and the local population was labor to be improved. Workers were expected to live in American-style houses, eat American food like oatmeal and canned vegetables, and even adopt wholesome American recreation like square dances and poetry readings. Alcohol, a local tradition, was completely banned, but this rigid dream quickly clashed with reality. The American managers, trained in assembly line syncing, forced workers onto standardized daytime shifts. They ignored the local knowledge that rubber trees produce best when tapped in the cool hours before dawn. This cultural imposition extended to housing, with American staff living in superior homes on higher ground, while Brazilian workers were crowded into smaller houses near mosquito-infested swamps. The town's very layout screamed of a hierarchy that placed some lives above others. The breaking point came in December 1930, in the cafeteria. Already dealing with terrible living conditions and a malaria epidemic, the workers were told they would now have to eat factory-style, lining up for their food on trays. For men who had endured months of foreign rules and foreign food, this was the final insult. Shouting turned into a full-blown riot. Workers overturned tables, smashed windows, and hurled equipment into the muddy streets. The American managers fled in panic to the river, watching their perfect, orderly town erupt into chaos. The riot was a symptom of a much deeper problem. Ford's biggest mistake was a catastrophic agricultural error. In their native Amazon, rubber trees grow scattered, which naturally controls the spread of a fungal disease called South American leaf blight. But Ford's managers, copying the plantation layouts that worked in Asia, planted the trees in dense, orderly rows. They created the perfect breeding ground for the blight. The fungus swept through the plantations, turning the neat groves into fields of blackened, dying trees. Local experts had warned them, but their knowledge was dismissed. The men in Michigan knew factories, not tropical agriculture, and they didn't think they needed to learn. Fordlandia was failing. Production was dismal, costs were soaring, and tropical diseases were rampant. But Henry Ford, a man who never once visited the site, simply doubled down. He started another project, Belterra, on supposedly better land, pouring in more money, more machinery, and more managers with the same blind spots. He directed the entire project from his desk in Dearborn, relying on filtered reports from managers eager to please him. The jungle, for Ford, was just an idea on a map, a problem to be solved with American willpower. Meanwhile, the people of Fordlandia found their own ways to survive. They smuggled alcohol, cooked traditional foods in secret, and maintained their own social lives beneath the rigid, imposed schedules. The town meant to reshape them was itself being reshaped by their resilience. The decline of Ford's empire wasn't limited to the jungle. In 1947, Henry Ford, the master of self-sufficiency, died by candlelight during a power outage at his own estate, Fair Lane. The massive 56-room mansion fell into disrepair, a symbol of a faded dream. Water seeped through the walls, beams rotted, and the gardens grew wild. Other monuments to his ambition vanished too. The Ford Rotunda burned to the ground. Old factories were demolished for parking lots. His son Edsel's estate, Gockler Point, had a different fate. After Edsel's death, his wife Eleanor donated the house and grounds to a public trust, turning a private mansion into a museum for everyone. It was an act of sharing, a move away from the exclusive control her father-in-law had cherished. And what became of Fordlandia? It entered its longest chapter not as a factory town, but as something stranger. It's a ghost town, but a living one. Rusted machinery stands beside new buildings. Children play in the shadows of structures their great-grandparents worked in. The past refuses to disappear, a quiet monument to the limits of control and the enduring power of people to shape their own lives, even within someone else's broken dream. The story of Fordlandia serves as a powerful reminder. You can't just impose your will on the world. You have to listen to it first. Inside, a young filmmaker, Marcus, adjusts his tripod. He came here by accident for a simple TV assignment, but found himself unsettled, not by the grandeur, but by the silences in the official story. He started digging, interviewing archivists and tracking down descendants of former staff, piecing together stories that had never been told in one place. The project grew far beyond what the TV station wanted. But Marcus kept going. His documentary isn't a simple celebration of Henry Ford's genius, nor is it a harsh critique. He learned that honest history sits with contradiction and allows complexity. The film covers all the sites of Ford's domestic empire: Fair Lane, the workers' houses in Dearborn, Gockler Point on Lake St. Clair, and even Fordlandia in Brazil. Marcus connects them all, showing how the same logic that designed hidden servant corridors in a mansion also led to inspection programs for workers' homes and imposed American food on Brazilian laborers. The scale changed, but the vision of control remained. But there's another layer to this map: the people who have reclaimed these spaces. Historians recovering erased stories, residents turning model houses into real homes, the community in Brazil that refused to vanish. The documentary ends not with Ford's death, but with a recent neighborhood gathering in Dearborn. Elderly residents who remember corporate oversight share tables with young families who only know the history through stories. Children run on lawns once measured for compliance. Laughter fills spaces designed for control. The images speak for themselves. Here is what was built. Here is what it cost. Here is what remains. And here is what people have made from it. The Great Hall at Fair Lane, once a place of rigid protocol, now hosts school groups and community events. A new generation of storytellers has emerged: filmmakers, oral historians, preservationists, who understand that saving buildings means saving the complex stories within them. They don't have Ford's vast resources or his absolute certainty. Instead, they offer something he never could: honesty about the costs, respect for the voices he ignored, and a willingness to let history be uncomfortable. The mansion empire is passing into new hands, and what they make of it remains to be seen. Evening sun now streams through Fair Lane's restored west windows, just as it was designed to. But the house is no longer waiting for Henry Ford's approval. University students now walk the grounds, not to admire the architecture, but to interrogate it. How does a space communicate power? Which doors were meant to be seen, and which were meant to be invisible? These questions would have baffled the original owners. Now, they're the basis of a semester's work. The powerhouse runs again, its restored turbines generating electricity not for one man's self-sufficiency, but for classrooms and workshops serving thousands. In Dearborn, porch lights flicker on, in houses once built as instruments of control. The enforced sameness has given way to the gentle chaos of personal taste. One yard has a vegetable garden, another is filled with ceramic gnomes, a third is a concrete basketball court. Children play unaware of the inspection visits and rules that once governed these very streets. The houses remain, but the surveillance has ended. At Gawkler Point, the sun sets over Lake St. Clair. A wedding party poses for photos on lawns that were once strictly private. They chose the location for its beauty, not its pedigree. The estate has shifted from a boundary to a backdrop, a setting for new memories. And deep in the Amazon, night falls on Fordlandia. The town glows with scattered lights from homes and a local bar, places where people relax, in defiance of rules that ended before their grandparents were born. The empires of control leave ruins, but not empty ones. The jungle reclaims plantations, but people plant new crops between the old rows. What endures is not the vision of one man, but the choices of everyone who came after. The lights in the windows are not the same lights. The people inside are not the same people. The stories told about these places grow more complex every year, including voices once kept outside the gates. This is what remains of the mansion empire. Not just what was built, but what others are still making from the structures left behind. Think about the brass doorknob at Fair Lane's main entrance. It's been turned maybe 1,000,000 times, by gloved hands during formal dinners, by calloused hands of workers, by nervous fingers before big meetings. The metal is worn smooth, shaped by decades of arrivals and departures. A docent polishes it, not because she has to, but to feel a tangible connection to everyone who touched it, before industrialists and servants, family and strangers, the powerful and the forgotten. She thinks about their hands, Henry Ford's, always rough from his farm boy years. Clara's, arranging flowers to bring softness into the stone walls. The hands of maids, scrubbing floors before dawn, and chauffeurs gripping steering wheels late into the night. Objects absorb history without understanding it. That doorknob will outlast us all, just as it outlasted Henry Ford. But unlike objects, humans remember selectively. The way we talk about Fair Lane has changed with every generation. Contemporaries saw a monument to ingenuity. Later critics saw megalomania. Today, interpreters try to hold both views at once, acknowledging achievement without ignoring the cost. This same re-examination is happening everywhere. In the workers' houses, descendants uncover the complicated conditions their prosperity was built on. At Ford House, curators highlight the voices that were once pushed to the margins. In Fordell, India, residents shape identities that include the American chapter without being defined by it. Memory is not preservation. Preservation tries to stop time. Memory moves and changes with the needs of the present. The houses can be restored, but the memories of what happened inside them cannot be put back the way they were. And that might be the most important lesson. Control fails, not just because systems break down, but because meaning cannot be frozen. Every generation reinterprets what it inherits. Every person who walks through a door brings their own understanding and leaves with a different one. Henry Ford wanted to build environments that shaped people permanently. The structures worked, but the psychological programming never fully did. People adapted, resisted, and smuggled their own beliefs into rooms designed to correct them. There's a quiet battle happening across cities and continents. It's a fight over history, money, and memory. Descendants of Ford workers are finding each other online, sharing old inspection reports and pay stubs. They're gathering in person, trading strategies for preserving the houses their families once lived in, houses that were once under the constant watch of the Ford Motor Company. These scattered homes are a collective inheritance, a legacy too big for any single owner to protect alone. Imagine Catherine, a descendant, leaving a lawyer's office in Detroit. She's holding a contract to sell her family's home, a piece of this history, but she can't sign it. Not yet. She needs to walk through the house one last time, to sit at the kitchen table where her grandmother served meals for 50 years. Ford built an empire he thought would last forever. The factories, the houses, the systems of control. But the factories have mostly closed. The control has collapsed. What's left are these properties, and the individuals who must now decide what to preserve and what to let go. The empire is being dismantled, deed by deed, in ways its founder could never have imagined. In a classroom at the University of Michigan, Dearborn, a student named David is connecting the dots. His research makes a startling claim. Ford's empire wasn't a strange historical blip. It was a template. The idea of company housing tied to a job, surveillance disguised as employee welfare, an architecture designed to shape private behavior. These ideas didn't die with Ford. They evolved. Think about it. The home inspections of the past echo in today's background checks that dig through your social media. The conditional company housing. It reappears in corporate relocation packages with subsidized homes that deepen your dependence on your employer. Those uniform workers' streets foreshadow modern subdivisions where every house looks the same, dictated by strict rules. The control is softer now, less obvious, but it's still there. The desire for organizations to reach beyond the workplace and shape our personal lives is stronger than ever. David's slides show the evolution. Ford believed life could be optimized, just like an assembly line. That belief has outlived him, but it's changed its vocabulary. It's no longer about efficiency. It's about wellness and culture fit. As David finishes his presentation, the students in the room realize how deeply they're already part of this system. They live in dorms with strict rules, work jobs managed by scheduling apps, and use platforms that track their every move. The questions Ford's empire raised about power and control are more urgent today than ever before. Let's go back to Fair Lane, Henry Ford's home. The scaffolding is down, and the house glows in the morning light. A visitor walks up the path. She isn't wealthy or connected. She just bought a ticket on her phone. She turns the same brass doorknob Ford once grasped and steps inside. The great hall is vast and echoing. But instead of orders and inspections, she is greeted with smiles and a map. The house is no longer a symbol of absolute command. It's a place of questions, open to anyone who wants to explore it. Outside, the Rouge River still flows, powering the turbines Ford built. But now, that electricity doesn't just light up one family's home. It powers classrooms and exhibits for the public. Across Dearborn, the old workers' streets are alive with ordinary life. Houses are painted bright colors Ford's inspectors would have forbidden. Gardens are planted with personal flair, not according to a diagram. The neighborhood breathes on its own. From the grand estates to the jungles of Fortlandia in Brazil, the story is the same. The empire's physical structures remain the houses, the streets, the water towers, but their meaning has changed. The walls that once enforced control now hold new stories. Stories of the very people who were never meant to be the main characters. Back at Fair Lane, The visitor moves on to the next room. Behind her, the door that once kept so many people out now waits open, ready for whoever comes next. Thanks for watching.